Hey, this is Michelle from Eerie River Publishing. How are you guys doing today? We are really excited. We are doing a live table read in just a few short minutes with our awesome authors from It Calls from the Forest 2. This is the second edition of our It Calls from series. And this one's like really close to our heart. It was our first one that we put out as a public call, and we had such a huge and amazing response from our authors that it blew up, which is why we now have a lot coming out, which is amazing. So these guys are the ones that essentially started it all. So we're going to start with Ian. He's going to be our first author because this is the story that we're going to actually be reading today. It's his story, The Heralding. So let's start with Ian. Ian, are you ready? Just give me a thumbs up. All right. Thumbs up was done. Here we go. Hey.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you doing?
I'm good.
Good.
Never, so that's great.
Yeah, thank you all for coming and watching. As far as the story goes, I guess I would say that this story is very inspired by my day job. I work for a land conservancy, doing a lot of nature-oriented field work. I spend a lot of time walking through the woods on my own, looking around and monitoring and taking notes and data and stuff like that. So I'm sure you'll see that reflected in the story.
Yeah, so then this one was essentially inspired by like your job and what you do. And have you ever seen anything crazy in the woods before?
Find crazy.
Out of the ordinary?
There's always something out of the ordinary. You're always like tripping over something like old rusted cars and you're like, how did that get there? Or sometimes you'll stumble across a really nice preserved like deer skeleton or something. And it's like, oh, that was unexpected for the day.
Yeah. That's some nice food for fodder though.
Oh yeah, absolutely. When you spend a lot of time walking around alone in the woods and the swamps, it can definitely be good fodder for writing.
Oh, perfect. Well, we're going to be reading your story later, so don't tell us too much about it. So what are you doing now? Are you working on anything, any solo projects, or are you in anything that's coming out?
Sure. I just submitted a few stories that I'm waiting to hear back from. So no guarantees of anything coming out super soon. I have my own novel that I like to work on and do some editing and look for agents or publication, whatever. But I'll soon be working on another short story for a different publisher called Thunderbird Studios.
Very cool.
Yeah. They have some cool stuff too.
Very excellent. Well, I am going to look forward to seeing what you have coming up next. But we're going to read your story very shortly. Next person I'm going to add on, I'm going to say goodbye for now and then say hello to Lex, who is another one of our authors. And let's add this one to the stream. There you are. Sorry, I forgot to ask if you were ready, but
all good.
You look ready.
Ready to go.
Yeah. So tell us about the story that you've got in here.
Yeah, so I wrote a little story called Those Things We Cannot See.
Yeah.
And much like Ian, it was also inspired by a place where I used to work. I worked at Sunken Meadow State Park on Long Island for about 6 years and used to go hiking in the woods there almost every day in the winters with my dog. It would be super quiet out there. Nothing weird ever happened, but I always sort of felt like, oh, this would be the perfect setting for like a horror movie or a horror story. Like anything could kind of happen out here.
Very cool. Do you want to tell us a little bit about what your story is about?
Sure. So it's about a search and rescue dog team going out looking for somebody who was missing. and they kind of end up finding a little bit more than they bargained for. I really like creature feature horror, so there's a little element of that in there.
Yeah, well, it's a really, I like that one really captured me when you read it. So I'm glad that we captured it.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Do you have anything coming out or anything on the docket of 2021?
I do. I have a kind of similar nature-based story, but this one's more like beachy coming out. I can't give too many details right now. I haven't heard everything back from the publisher yet.
Yeah.
But that should be sometime this year, and I've been submitting a few stories here and there. So
well, that's exciting.
Yes.
Well, fingers are crossed.
Yes, thank you.
Absolutely. All right, Lex, I'm going to say goodbye, and we're going to put on C.E. Hunter next, and we'll see you in a couple minutes for the read.
Perfect. Thank you, Michelle.
Hi, no problem. All right, are you ready, Mr. Hunter? Yes, he is ready. There we go.
Hello.
Hello.
How we
You
doing?
are joining us all the way from merry old
England, yes. Yeah. In a small little fishing town called Grimsby, which is as grim as it sounds.
Oh,
yeah.
So lots
it's home,
of bees then.
But it's home.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, I made a really horrible joke about bees. So.
I missed that one, sorry.
No, don't worry. It's missed nothing.
Cool.
So tell us about the story that you've got in this one. Like what inspired you? Like give us a little illy bitty elevator.
So my story is called That View from the M62, and the M62 is a very long, dreary road in the UK, which goes into Manchester, which I've done that road so many times. And on the way down there is a reservoir, and it's just the most incredible view to drive past. It's called Scandine Reservoir, if anyone's interested. And every time you go past it, there's a story there. There's something I want to do there. So me and my fiance one day, we actually drove around to it off the motorway. And I was just, right, I need to figure out what's going to happen here. Something's going to come out of this. And it just went from there. It was a horrible, horrible drive to it. And we struggled a bit up the narrow roads, but we made it. And yeah, I wanted to get something that captured it's kind of serene. It's very still and very quiet, considering it's next to a motorway. And yeah, it developed into this story of these two brothers who live in a small little village just next to where the reservoir is. Obviously, different name in that. And I just thought I wouldn't want to be around that one at night time. I wouldn't want to be anywhere near it.
Yeah.
So, what could I get from that? The story took a lot of different turns and a lot of ways it went, and it eventually led to being what it is. And I was really proud of it. I was really happy with it. And yeah, it just every time I go past it now, I'm like, I see it differently because I'm like, that's my story now. I know what's there.
No, well, it was a really interesting story, and it does take a completely different turn, and even the tone of it is such a like it is a different tone than some of the other stories that are in the book, which is what I liked. It was a good mix to have. So I'm really glad we've got that in there. What do you have coming up for 2021?
Well, I'm in my final year of university doing my writing course, so I'm working on a screenplay at the minute, actually, for a full feature film.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, which it taps more into the sort of crime thriller side than a horror side. But, well, exclusive for you now, I've just finished my first draft of what will be going for It Calls From the Doors. So,
Ooh.
Yeah, draft one is finished.
Yeah.
So
that first draft is always the hardest to plow through, I always find. At least for me, getting everything out of my head and onto paper.
Yeah. And that's it. And it's the first time I've worked on two big projects together as well at the same time. So I find myself immersing myself in one and going too far, so then I go to the other one. And yeah, but no, it's hopefully gonna make the cut in the end. We'll see. But yeah.
I hate commenting on stuff like that because I don't know.
Yeah, of course.
I haven't seen it yet, but I'm excited to read it for sure.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, I really enjoy your story. So I'm sure this one's going to be really just like awesome.
It's a different take on things I've done before, and it's yeah, I've just gone with it, so we'll see. But
Cool.
I'm going to leave it alone for a few weeks and then go back to it and realize I hate about 80% of it. But yeah.
And again, first draft, that's what you do.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, so we're going to say goodbye for right now, and then we'll join.
Cool.
You'll join us when we're all on screen, and we will read the new book, new story.
Thank you very much.
Lost my brain. Just give me a minute. See you in a minute. All right, and then next we have A.S. Mackenzie, and it looks like, yeah, we got a thumbs up. Here we go. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well, thank you. How are you?
I'm great. Nice to see you.
Yes, nice to see everybody.
Yeah. So your story, I cannot say the word.
Atchophilia.
Huh.
Atchophilia.
Okay.
Yeah, Atchophilia. Yep.
Atchophilia.
Atchophilia. I know.
What
I know.
is
It stumbles everybody. It's actually the name of a real swamp state park in Louisiana.
I was going to ask that. I'm like, is this a real word?
Yeah, in Louisiana, it's a real state park swamp.
Perfect. Yeah. So tell us about, because obviously your story takes place there. Tell us a little bit about it, just like a little elevator pitch, and kind of what inspired this story, because we've had a lot of people comment on it. So
yeah, well, I'll tell you the inspiration first was actually twofold. Like Lex, I like creature feature things, and so I had this creature in mind for probably, and this will give away my age, probably almost 3 decades. And I didn't know where to put him and wanted to put him someplace, and I just never could find a spot. And then I'm originally from Florida, and there's a lot of swamps in Florida as well. So
yeah,
I was looking back through some old photos, and I came across a picture I took of the swamp water. And then from there, I was just thinking, okay, what if somebody's just waiting in there for this creature, like purposely waiting for this creature? Not they stumbled across it, but waited for it. And so that's where the whole thing kind of carried on from there. I wanted to take a guy who's out for redemption and revenge on this creature that killed his friends, and the lengths he would go to try to find this thing, this horrific thing.
No, it was really, for me, it was very captivating. I was just like, I felt in the moment when I was reading it. So I really enjoy that. I hope our readers and ones that have read it and will read it also just like enjoyed as much as a lot of other people did, and as much as I did, at least.
Yeah, I certainly hope so.
Yeah. So what do you got for 2021 coming up?
Well, I just a couple weeks ago, a small collection of short stories of mine was released through Domain UK.
I saw that on Twitter.
Yeah. It's called Unwelcome Space and Other Stories. So that's out now in ebook, and by the end of this month, it'll be on paperback as well.
Very cool.
And I got an acceptance for a Christmas anthology for next November, and I've got.
Are they doing that already?
They
How
are.
am I supposed to plan so far ahead?
I don't know. I just said okay, sure. And then let's see. I've got 3 other submissions out, and you should actually see a couple things in your inbox before too long too.
Perfect. I can't wait.
Yeah,
it's gonna be good. Yeah, 2021 seems like it's going to be a good year, like a busy year for everyone, which is wonderful to see, because that's the wonderful thing about anthologies, is that you get a collection of voices and you can find all of these just stars, which is like these, like new favorite authors, right? So
it's my favorite thing. I didn't realize how much I was going to enjoy. I always knew I liked writing short stories more than long form. I've got a novella and a couple of things that I self-published out, but and I don't mind the long forms, but I really like just doing like quick short things, and having the anthology is available for these things to get out there. I'm loving.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. Okay, I'm going to go and grab everyone else. Is everyone? I'm going to start with Ian again. He's ready now. I saw him sit.
Yeah, all set.
We're all coming on. Get ready. So we are going to read Ian's story. Everyone's got a character. I'm going to tag out because I don't want to have to take up space in the screen if I'm not there, but I'm going to be reading along with you guys. Ian, do you want to give us a little, I know we talked a little bit about it at the beginning. Do you want to just give us a little bit of a, this is what it's about? Or do we want to just jump right in?
I would say we can jump right into it, but I can give a story if you want.
Jump right into it. What do you think?
Okay.
Okay, so one thing we didn't actually discuss, for when people say their narration, my brain has just, when you say your part, Ian is going to say the ending of it. So the person that's reading Harrison will read the first sentence, and then Ian will read Harrison after. We should have said that before, so I apologize. But
We got it.
All good. We'll figure it out.
yeah, like I'm just gonna tag out. You guys have fun.
Make it.
I just have to figure out how to actually unstream myself. Oh my gosh, I did this last time. You guys talk. Don't worry about me. I'll figure it out.
Okay.
I'm sorry, guys.
We'll wait for a minute.
All right.
Oh, hi, puppy. This is why I had to remove my dog.
Okay.
Okay, yeah, have fun.
Well, me then. Everybody ready to go?
We're good.
All good.
All right. Like a lot of beds?
Harrison asked,
Fuck no, kid. Not a lot of birds.
crackled his car speaker.
You think I don't know what a lot of fucking birds sounds like? And it ain't bugs either. I'm telling you, this is something I've never heard before. And I've lived around here for near 60 years now. This is something weird as shit, and I'm telling you, we gotta check it out.
Right.
Said Harrison with a sigh. He ran his fingers through his hair and checked his watch. Almost 6. If he were heading home right now, he'd be stuck in rush hour, but out here, he'd hardly seen any cars for 20 minutes. Corn, sure, but no cars.
And why don't you just go look at it yourself?
Because the sound's coming from the state's land, and if I wanted to get to it, I'd have to cross Old Winnie's property, and Old Winnie hates me. No way she'd ever give me permission. I might have done a lot of things, but I ain't trespassing on Old Winnie's land, even if it's only 50 feet of her property between me and the state forest. I owe her dead husband that much at least, and he's been in the ground 5 years now. Fuck, kid, didn't your sister fill you in on all of this?
Harrison thought back to the text he'd gotten from his sister. As far as he could recall, it said something like, "Got a call from old Jerry, something weird at the cabin. Go check it out? I'm on the way up." He stifled another sigh.
It was a little vague. What's it sound like?
Sounds like someone fell asleep on the low end of a church organ is what it sounds like.
Said Jerry.
Never heard anything like it. My guess is that it's some weird-ass new equipment from the developers that are tearing up old Rigby's land. You hear that Aspen Airs bought the old Rigby farm? Already done plowing shit, so they're probably going to make it into another fucking strip mall or something. Wouldn't put it past these idiots to store their equipment on state land where they think nobody's looking, just so they don't have to keep towing it back and forth from the city. I'm not going to be able to be at your place till 8 or so, but then we'll nip right on over there and check it out.
Harrison considered the clock again. It was about another hour or so to the family cabin, and to walk the trail across the 20 acres or so of forest to the state land would take half an hour at least, maybe more in the fading light that 8 o'clock would bring. Harrison had to admit that Jerry was still relatively spry for his age, but the wiry, white-haired, bespectacled man's body had started to fail him in the past couple of years, and his presence would slow their progress even more. If Harrison wanted to have even a chance at getting back to town and sleeping in his own bed rather than crashing at the cabin, there was no way he was going to be able to wait around for his dad's old drinking buddy.
Sounds good, Jerry.
Harrison lied.
I'll see you in a bit.
All right, see you soon, kid.
Harrison hung up his phone, sighing deeply. He had absolutely zero desire to be driving to the family cabin on a Tuesday night with work in the morning, but he supposed it was a part of his newfound responsibilities. When his father died last year, he, his brother Aaron, and his sister Carrie inherited the cabin. Harrison had become the cabin's caretaker without volunteering, since Carrie lived in Florida, and Aaron's job as a global marketing executive took him all over the world. Harrison, despite being the youngest, was the obvious choice to keep an eye on the small cabin and the 20 or so acre of lands that it sat on until they decided what to do with it. The cabin's fate was a heated debate in itself, of course. Aaron desperately wanted to keep the cabin, Carrie desperately wanted to sell it and the land it was on, and Harrison hovered somewhere in the middle, so as of yet, no decision had been made. Harrison was truly torn as to what his eventual vote regarding the cabin would be. On the one hand, the extra money would be nice, but on the other hand, his job as a mid-level software developer for a mid-level company provided him with all he needed for his fairly modest lifestyle. On top of that, it was hard for him to imagine selling the cabin that had been such a major part of their childhood to some stranger. Every year for the first 18 years of his life, Harrison had spent some greater or lesser part of his summer up north at that cabin with his family. They had explored the forest, hiked trails, and had once tried talking to the birds who nested by the cabin when they were little. Even old Jerry, pain in the ass that he might be now, was a huge part of Harrison's childhood. When Jerry's hair was less white and his gait less shuffling, he'd spent many a summer morning teaching Harrison how to shoot a bow. Jerry had been a patient if stern teacher, and Harrison didn't want to lose the place he loved. As the vibrations from loose stones in the driveway rattled his car, Harrison couldn't help but smile a little at the sight of the little cabin sitting quietly in the woods, just the way it always had. He rolled down the window and let the sweet herbal scent of the pines fill his nostrils. The chirping trill of a toad sounded somewhere in the distance, probably from one of the many small pools that dotted the forest. Harrison breathed in slowly and released it, allowing the cool air to course through his veins and reinvigorate him. His irritation at his sister and old Jerry faded as the tension in his body seeped away. He'd been so caught up in his work lately. Maybe a night at the cabin, away from the city, wasn't such a bad idea after all. He parked outside the shed, a small slapdash structure about 50 feet or so from the cabin itself. Harrison had only glanced in the shed since his father passed away. At some point, they would need to go in there and sort through the piles of rusted tools and old paint cans from projects long past, but so far the opportunity had yet to arise. Even with his father dead and gone, and Harrison himself in his early 30s, somehow going in the shed without permission still felt like a violation of his old man's personal space. The shed was much closer to the trailhead than the cabin itself, so Harrison locked his car and started down the path toward the state land. Deep down, he knew how ridiculous it was to lock the car on his family property when no other humans were around for miles, but Harrison was enough of a city boy that he couldn't even fathom leaving it unlocked anywhere, no matter the circumstances. Dappled evening sunlight speckled the trail as Harrison walked deeper into the forest. He walked quickly and with purpose, and with hardly any attention paid to his route. The trails themselves were so solidly cemented in his memory that he knew he would be able to picture them till the day he died. The old fence that marked the boundary between his family's property and the state land had long since rusted and fallen into the soil, but he vaguely knew where it once had been. By the time he reached the boundary, his mind had been soothed by the peace of the evening forest. Wandered on to other things, to the point that he'd nearly forgotten that he was supposed to be listening to something. Then, to his mild astonishment, Harrison heard the sound. It was very similar to what Jerry had described, some sort of odd, low-pitched hum. It was louder than he'd expected, more like the bass line at a rock concert than a gentle note from a church organ. It definitely didn't sound natural, not unless there was a humpback whale hiding in the trees. It also didn't sound like any artificial machinery Harrison had ever known either. Holy shit, the old man was right. There was something bizarre going on in the woods. Snapped out of his peaceful trance by the realization, Harrison covered one ear and spun around. He listened intently, trying to determine the general direction of the sound source. He set off to the east, away from the trail, towards where he thought the sound might be coming from. After a few minutes, he was rewarded by a sharp increase in volume. It felt as though his very bones were reverberating with the sound. Wincing in discomfort, Harrison covered both ears with his hands, continuing his search. After a 5-minute hike, Harrison was scowling in confusion. He'd had no luck finding the source of the sound, and every time he thought he was approaching the loudest point, it started getting quieter again. The sound was coming not from one distinct point, but from a circle of land a few hundred feet in diameter. Working off of that theory, Harrison walked back to where he thought the approximate center of the circle would be and stood still. In a moment of inspiration, he knelt down, ignoring the smears of mud coating his jeans, and pressed his ear to the dirt. Nothing. So whatever it wasn't underground. Then where was it coming from? There was nothing else there except for more forest. Harrison sat on the ground, stumped. Maybe he should just go back to the shed and wait for Jerry. The old man lived much closer to the land than Harrison did. He might have a better idea about the identity of this mystery sound. Maybe there was some species of rare bass cicada or something. Besides, if Harrison stayed out here much longer, he was liable to get hearing damage. Without warning, the sound stopped. Harrison looked around, but nothing appeared to have changed. He stood, intending to do a walk around his imaginary circle again, a final check before he doubled back to the shed. The moment he stood to leave, a vine wrapped around his foot. Harrison stared. Where had that come from? He made to leave, but his foot was thoroughly ensnared. With a sigh, he knelt down to free himself. That was when a second vine wrapped around his left hand and a third wrapped around his right. A final vine, thicker than the rest, wrapped around his torso, constricting him like a snake. Before Harrison had a chance to respond, the vines began to pull him, wrapping him up and pressing his body down against the dirt. More vines, and now shrubs and grasses as well, started to creep over his body, forcing him into the mud. Swallowed by the vegetation, Harrison screamed. Harrison faded back into consciousness in complete darkness. His head pounded with such ferocity that it made him nauseous, and his first few seconds back in the world of the living were spent concentrating on forcing the warm sensation of vomit back down into his throat. He quickly became aware of a few surprising revelations regarding his current situation. He was lying down on a flat, smooth surface. He was tied tightly in place with little movement available to his arms or legs, and his wrists were throbbing nearly as much as his head was. There was a small pressure against his back as well, but it caused no more sensation than what might be caused by an errant pebble situated between his body and the surface he was tied to. For the first few moments, Harrison focused only on what his senses could tell him. The darkness was full. He could see nothing. He heard nothing. There was no sound. He tasted blood. It was possible his nose had been bleeding, or maybe tongue. He ignored his sense of touch, for all he felt was pain. But the smell, he knew that smell. It was a mixture of dust, mold, old chemicals, wood shavings, and dirt. The combination should be utterly revolting, but to Harrison, it was buried as deeply into his brain as his own name. In a fraction of an instant, he knew where he was. He was back on his property, roughly tied to his father's long wooden workbench in the shed.
Shit,
He muttered quietly. The word escaped from Harrison in a fraction of an instant, and he immediately knew that it was a mistake. There was a sound like the rustling of leaves, perhaps 10 feet away from him. Harrison desperately tried to picture the shed's current condition in his mind and pinpoint the sound. By his estimation, the sound came from the direction of the ancient rusting metal shelving unit that held old cans of varnish and paint. The rustling sounds crept closer, except it wasn't just rustling anymore. It had gained a slithering quality to it as well. The sound a wet sack of soil might make as it was dragged across the floor. The sound stopped, and a rush of air warmed Harrison's cheek. His nostrils filled with the smell of freshly turned earth. A few clumps of something gritty fell into Harrison's face, one slipping into his mouth. It was the taste of earth, mixed with the blood that was already there. There was a strange rattling sound. It could have been a laugh, perhaps, or it could have been a guttural growl. A new sensation now, this one of cold, rusted metal pressed hard against his cheek.
You are here, yes? You are the structure builder, yes? Not the first, but progeny of the first, yes, yes. This is your structure. Do not struggle. We have bound you with old steel from the forest. Barbed wire fences, yes. placed by many men many years ago. Could bind you with reeds and vines and thorns, yes, but old steel is stronger. Much old steel in the forest.
The rattling laugh erupted again, spraying chunks of dirt over Harrison's face. He choked on one of the clumps and coughed harshly, trying to eject the soil from his mouth without vomiting as well. His head now throbbed in a combination of fear and pain, but in his muddled state of mind, he spat out the first questions that popped into his brain.
Why the fuck am I here? Who are you?
The presence above Harrison shifted slightly as though to move away.
A question, yes. You came here because of the heralding, yes?
The heralding? What the hell is a heralding?
The sound from the trees.
Yeah, sure. Derek called and told me that there was a weird noise coming from the state land. Was that you?
The heralding was not for you.
The presence loomed over him, and rusted metal brushed briefly against his neck. It rubbed gently back and forth against his unshaven whiskers in a slow, methodical rhythm, almost like a very slow shave.
The heralding was for me. Forest can't fight, no, not against axes and saws and earth-moving machines. But me, I can fight. Forests don't like to herald, no, no, no. Don't like the blood that we bring. Very slow to retaliate, a forest is. But the forests are getting wise, yes? They know they need us now. The trees that you heard were calling because the forest is in pain, yes. Pain and fear, yes, that's what leads to a heralding. The trees need help against the structure builders, like you.
Slimy tendrils of something, maybe pond weeds or wet leaves, brushed against Harrison's cheek. The metal on his throat pushed down a little harder.
What? No.
Harrison's voice broke. He coughed violently again and noticed that the pressure on his throat lessened a little when he did so. Maybe he had a moment to talk.
I'm not hurting the forest. I don't even live here most of the year. I just come to visit. Besides,
He added,
the trees that were calling aren't even on my land. That's state land over there.
Your land, state's land, conservancy's land, the forest doesn't care for this.
the thing growled at him.
Small distance from here, perhaps 300 trees away, there was a wound done to the forest. Many trees cut, grass destroyed, flowers destroyed, nests destroyed, soil removed and replaced with stone. It is not the first time this was done to the forest, not by far. But the forest knows it will not be the last, and so the forest heralded. It was wise to do this. I have not been above ground in many years, many, many years. But now that I am here,
Metal maintained pressure on Harrison's neck, but now the slimy tendrils of the thing crept over his neck as well, cold and damp and horrible.
I see that the forest was very wise to do this.
The Rigby farm. Gary told him the developer had already finished clear cutting. Harrison had never really considered the Rigby's land to be part of the same forest as his, but he supposed if he looked at an aerial map and only considered the trees.
I didn't do that.
He squeaked.
That was the developer from Aspen Airs. I don't even know who he is. I can find the bastard's name if you let me go.
No proof you have of your claims. You are a structure builder. The forest knows this. The wound unto the forest will be repaid unto you.
The tendrils lay across the full length of Harrison's throat now, but the metal withdrew.
This old steel is strong, stronger than flesh and blood and bone, yes. You can die with this, yes, but it is not right. Too fast, too easy, and not a proper punishment for the wound of the forest. There is a plant beneath you, grown through this table with my help. Japanese knotweed it is called by humans. It was brought to this land by your ancestors many years ago. A problem for the structure builders now, it is, and many of your kind to try to kill it when they find it. But it is a tough plant, very tough. It grows through stone, through human-altered wood, through anything. Grows through your structures, makes them crumble. Normally grows slow, yes, but I will make it grow fast. It is an appropriate weapon, a good way for you to die.
The earthy breath filled Harrison's nostrils again. The presence loomed mere inches from his face. Its voice dropped into a satisfied whisper.
You will crumble too when it grows through you.
The subtle pressure in Harrison's back, the one he'd assumed to be a pebble, moved slightly, just enough for him to feel it. It began to push against his back, gently at first and then in earnest. He arched his back on the table, but this gave him only the slightest reprieve before the plant pressed against his back again.
Fuck!
He screamed in panic. The creature was no longer above him, but he knew it was still in the room. The knotweed hurt now, bruising his skin, searching for a weak point. Harrison strained unsuccessfully against his restraints, but the barbed wire sliced deeply into his wrists. The pain was dizzying, but through that pain came an idea, a last idea that presented itself to him.
This wire, the old steel. Where did you get it? What part of the forest?
The creature made an unconcerned noise, but it responded.
I found the old steel between the two small ponds where the frogs and tadpoles thrive, and the rows of white pines. There's more, much more, but I needed only this.
That's the northern boundary of my property. The barbed wire was put there to mark the fence fucking ages ago. I can't do anything on the other side of it by human law. The developer owns the Rigby land now where the trees were, and he's cutting them down to make a fucking strip mall or something. Please, I promise. I couldn't have destroyed.
Harrison's words melted into screams as he felt the knotweed pierce through his shirt and puncture his skin, entering his body in the lower back just to the right of his spine. The pain was excruciating, but even worse was the sensation of movement in the wound as the plant searched for a weak point to continue to grow. The creature did not respond at first, and the only sound in the cabin was Harrison's screams. When it eventually spoke again, it sounded thoughtful.
What is a developer?
It asked in a calm voice, nearly drowned out by Harrison's screams as the knotweed expanded in his flesh. Then there was movement and a sound at the far end of the cabin. It opened, light flooding into the shed. There was a flurry of movement to Harrison's right, but through the mask of pain, he never got a clear glimpse of the creature. Only a flurry of leaves, dirt, some twigs or branches, and something wet dragging across the floor before it vanished beneath the table and sank into the hole that knotweed had made.
Harrison, you in there, kid?
Came a concerned voice. Subtly, Harrison made out Jerry's silhouette against the sunlight that now filled the cabin.
What? Why are you tied to the table? Holy shit, is this a sex thing? Fuck, kid, I didn't mean to interrupt. I just heard yelling, Jesus Christ, you're bleeding. Is that barbed wire? Kid, we need to get you.
But Harrison, suddenly colder than he'd ever been in his life, lost consciousness. He didn't hear anything else. Harrison spent 3 days in the hospital before returning to the cabin. Jerry had managed to cut through the barbed wire using a pair of bolt cutters he found in the tool shed and, in a surprising show of strength, dragged the much larger and younger man out to his car and rushed him to the hospital. Although he'd lost a fair amount of blood on the workshop table and in Jerry's car, the wound hadn't struck anything vital. Harrison had stabilized quickly. He'd spoken to Carrie and Aaron over the phone and Jerry twice since the incident, but he hadn't been able to bring himself to tell any of them about the creature, even after a few probing questions from Jerry about whether he'd made it to the source of the sound. He did, however, thank the man profusely for taking him to the hospital. He even managed to get Jerry to accept payment to get the car reupholstered despite the old man's protests. Harrison knew how it would sound if he tried to tell anyone about the creature. He also knew that he didn't want his siblings trying to send him to therapy. He didn't want to catch glimpses of furtive discussions about his mental state among the hospital staff. And most of all, he didn't want to think about events preceding his injury. Each time he let his thoughts drift back to the shed, his nose filled with the smell of earth, his breathing quickened, and every rational thought in his brain was crowded out by dark thoughts and an overwhelming sense of panic. When Jerry dropped him off back at the cabin after his 3 days were up, he kept his eyes glued to his feet. The moment Jerry's car was out of sight, he made a break for his car at a dead run, determined not to look up for fear of catching a glimpse of the horrible shed. He clicked his key fob as he ran, almost crying in relief when the headlights flashed in response. He the door open with fumbling hands, then promptly tripped in his haste to get into the car and drive far, far away. Harrison sprawled unceremoniously in the dirt, landing hard on his shoulder. He snatched at the open car door, intending to use its weight to haul himself back to his feet, but he froze in place the moment he saw the front driver's side tire. A plant, perhaps thigh-high, had grown straight through the tire, now flat and useless. Harrison scurried around the car on his hands and knees, not even bothering to rise to his feet. Panic lodged deep in his throat as he confirmed that all 4 tires were in the same state. Harrison whimpered quietly, putting his head in his hands. There was no doubt in his mind that this strange bamboo-like plant was Japanese knotweed. He'd only had his head in his hands for a few moments before he smelled earth. Then he felt the warm caress of breath against the back of his neck. He thought about running, but then he thought about how much greenery there was between him and the main road. How many trees, how much soil, how many holes, and he saw little point in it. Harrison screwed his eyes shut tighter and waited. A horrible voice, the one that had filled Harrison's nightmare for 3 days, spoke.
Give me a name.
What?
Harrison whimpered. A small weight, hardly heavier than a mouse, rested on his shoulder. A single drop of water trickled down his shirt.
Developer, the one you mentioned. The forest thinks you're talking true. Give me a name.
Harrison unscrewed his eyes, waiting a moment for them to focus, his throat choking out his reply. He felt a horrible, slimy feeling, tendrils cold and clammy on the back of his neck.
Do it,
whispered Harrison's nightmare. With trembling hands, Harrison fumbled his phone out of his pocket and Googled Aspen Airs LLC. End.
Excellent.
So good.
Good job, everyone.
Nice.
Thank you all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm never going to be able to go back to that story without thinking of Harrison as British.
I had a hard time not chuckling every time too.
That was brilliant. I had to switch to a headset. Can people still hear me?
Mhm.
Okay, good. Well, that was awesome. Thanks so much for doing that. I feel like you all deserve a round of applause. So,
Oh, thank you.
others around.
Well, thank you so much for offering it.
Well, yeah,
Thank you.
no, it was a lot of fun. So that was the heralding from It Calls from the Forest, Volume 2, which is available. If you're looking for physical copies, you can get them pretty much everywhere. Barnes & Noble, you just have to go online. You can also order them from our website, and I can send you a copy directly. We also have, for those that like swag, this book specifically has 2 postcards. And it's got a bookmark. So if you want to order a collection of things, we can get something out for you guys.
They do go international as well.
Yeah, exactly. Like it doesn't. And because even independent bookstores have access to them because they're an international book. So if you have a bookstore that you really love and you want to support, just ask for them to order it in and you can get it through them too. So, and then digitally, it's available online at Amazon because we are doing exclusive digital through them. But it looks like we've got a couple people. Chris Hewitt, you got a great job, guys.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, great work from fabulous authors from Michelle. And then she went, I meant great, not get work. Sorry, I had to put that in there. But yeah, so we're here for a little bit longer. If anyone has any questions, you can type them down below because I do know we have some people watching. But I also, I've got some questions for you guys. My first question, and it can be for everybody, is do you have a favorite horror trope? Like we all write horror. I know that some of us will write other genre as well. But is there like a horror trope that you just, as ridiculous as it is, love?
I got to admit that I have a personal weakness for the dwindling cast stories.
Oh, like the last girl trope?
I guess. I mean, not necessarily like like slasher films, not necessarily like that, but something about starting with a larger cast of characters and getting it kind of whittled down, especially if it's unexpectedly whittled.
Oh yeah, the unexpected is needed.
I can piggyback off of that and say mine is definitely the final girl.
Yeah.
I kind of grew up on old slashers, so that's very near and dear to my heart.
Me too. I love that one.
So good.
It's funny. I actually wrote an article for Kindle Reviews earlier this year about how I don't like modern horror. And it sounded terrible because I wrote it for a horror review blog and I'm a horror writer, but it really had more to do with the fact that, I grew up on, old creature feature stuff of the late 50s and 60s and early 70s horror movies, and they were terrible, poorly acted, poorly effects, all that kind of stuff. So when I watch like the penultimate horror movies now, everyone's, Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street, Halloween, all those, I don't like them, and I feel like I kind of get kicked out a little bit and have to turn in my horror card. But I love the older, Vincent Price and those kinds of just deep gothic horror movies. Those are the ones that I always go back to.
Yeah.
I cross too many things. If it's horror related, I'm interested. Like old creature features, like you say, fantastic. But I do love slashers, and I love modernized horror and like things like Hereditary that have come out recently, fantastic stuff. But Universal Monsters, classic stuff. Comes to watching, fantastic. But I tend to do a lot more watching than reading with it. I write it, but I watch more than I read. So,
and this one's for kind of like people that are just interested in the writing process. Do you have any sort of like writing ritual that you do either before you start something or right after you finish it? Or food?
Drinking. I call it writing lube. I mean, it's such a cliche, but like if I'm ready to sit down and write something, I need my ambience. I need everything set and ready. Sure, I've got silence, quiet, good drink on the go.
Candles lit, the room darkened.
Yeah, literally that. It's so cliche, but it worked. And a cigar waiting for when I finished.
Oh, brilliant.
Yeah.
That's not a bad ritual.
Yeah, that's not a bad.
That sounds amazing.
You're good.
I'm such a pantser writer. I've tried so many times to write outlines. I've tried so many times to write, full notes and character studies, and trying to, do all the proper things that I've when I went to university and all the books from famous authors that I love, and telling me about how they go through the writing process. And I've tried them all, and I end up so much, just writing the story when I'm trying to write notes that I just start writing the story. And so far it's worked out pretty well, but I do know that I'm going to have to probably adjust my ability here a little bit, because if I want to keep going at this, I can't just all the time just do it from the seat of my pants. I'm going to have to be a little more prepared.
I feel like you can when it's shorter stories, but when you're looking to expand things that have to have like different character arcs and different plots and all, then that's when you kind of do need to be like plotting a little bit more. But right now, when you're doing short stories, like whatever works for you works for you. Yep. I am definitely not a let's draft this out first kind of person.
I've found that I do best if I write outlines that I don't care about. Like do an outline, but with full acceptance that by the second bullet point, I may have thrown the whole outline out.
Yeah. With an expectation it's going to change, right? Like
yeah.
Not how it's going to look.
Yeah, because you can fall into the other trap where you're so rigidly stuck in your outline that even if you have like a better, more cohesive idea or whatever, it's harder to follow because you're so stuck on your outline.
Completely, for sure. And I think a lot of people get stuck in the box that they create themselves, right? So it's better to be able to be free. What about you, Lex? What do you do?
So I do a lot of writing on the go. So I don't really have like a ritual per se, but the one thing that's consistent is that I need music. I always have like a playlist queued up and ready to go. For some reason, I can't deal with silence. It makes me a little crazy. So.
Wow. I am the complete opposite. If I'm trying to write, if there is noise or distraction anywhere, I am distracted. That's me in general. Like I'm always like.
Yeah. I have a website that I pull up for sounds, and it does rain and wind, and that's what I just have going.
Yeah.
I don't. If I have music, I'm going to listen to the music, and I'm going to end up finding myself just distracted and paying attention to the music for a while.
You need instrumental stuff, don't you?
Yeah. If I have silence, then my brain is just everywhere else, and yeah.
You listening?
Yeah, no, that makes sense. So, Lex, do you listen to like what Mackenzie listens to, or do you listen to like?
Depends on what I'm writing.
Yeah.
So if I'm like right now, I'm working on a story that's set in the 80s. So everything that I'm listening to is 80s. When I was working on my story for this book, it was a lot of those sort of ambient sounds in the woods, rain sounds, that kind of stuff.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Very cool. So does anyone have any advice for people that are wanting to get into authorhood besides don't?
Be patient. That's the thing. This is the long haul thing. This is not a, you're going to suddenly be an overnight success. And even if you do get success, it's going to be a long time before, that success translates into, it's something you can say you do for your job. It always have a means to live your life, for your money and your bills and everything like that, and your for purpose. But your writing can be your outlet. Your writing can be the thing that just helps you release your emotions, your energy, your thoughts, anything like that, and that still counts as being an author. And it works out really well because, again, the myth of the wealthy author is very prevalent, and it's not really true, but it's still very fulfilling as long as you can keep it as, this is my outlet, not my profession.
Yes. Realistic expectations of what being an author means. But everyone does have a different definition of authorhood as also what they want to achieve too, right? So
it's very personal.
But like going in with the expectation that you're going to get $1 million book deal right from the get-go is like, I'm sure it happens, but
I just love how everyone can relate to that.
I know.
I always got told not to be afraid to put things out there, and people are your first things that you do. You hold on to them so dearly, and just don't be afraid to get it out there. And you never know what could happen. 18 months ago, I'd had nothing published anywhere, and here I am now. Things can change so quickly. And if you're struggling with something, I got the best piece of advice I ever got is, when you're struggling with anything, is to remember that everything is material. You can look anywhere you want for anything and find material. And I think it's important for people who are trying to write, they're trying to wait for the inspiration or wait for something. It's like, just go outside, you'll find something. It'll help.
Yeah. It sounds like that's what most of us did for these stories.
Right, yeah.
I would go into the forest and saw like a pristine carcass of a deer.
If I had to go with one thing, I think what helps me the most is to remind myself that nobody ever has to see your first draft. It can be as
nobody should.
Yeah, exactly. It can be as horrible and messy and full of grammar mistakes. You can have decided to edit out a character halfway through, or change someone's way of talking or whatever. But you got to finish it, because once you finish it, you can go back and fix all that first.
You just have to get through it, even if it's like a dumpster fire.
Exactly.
You just
Once
have
it
to, like,
exists, you can fix
close
it.
the lid after,
Mhm.
and like then go in with water or baking soda. It depends on how big the fire is.
Yeah. And if you want to make yourself feel better, turn off spell check.
I just ignore Grammarly. I'm like, I don't care what that says.
Yeah. Just if you turn off spell check, you're never going to look back and see all the little red squiggly lines from where you just overtype something, and just
That's actually a beautiful
keep going
idea.
through.
Yeah.
I'm loving that idea, actually. Although Alana, my editor, would probably be like, who told you to do that?
And I would also say, just don't hang your hat on one particular story. You never know what's going to sell where. So always kind of have something in the works. And if one story doesn't seem to be working out, you'll have others to fall back on. It's changing, and everything's subjective. You'll find your place for your work.
Yeah, exactly. Just keep going at it. And if you're only writing one story, get outside and into the forest and keep writing stories.
Exactly.
Find a deer carcass.
Well, those are my questions for you guys. Do you have any questions for me before we take out? Or anything that you want to say or plug? Or
I think we all kind of want to say buy our book.
yeah.
So yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And I will plug it again. It Calls from the Forest too. This is the hardcover book.
Yeah.
Anyone has there.
Yeah, mine is. Let's see, where's it?
It's
Shows the camera.
beautifully,
Right
beautifully
there.
formatted. Everyone's names are at the back. Yeah, well,
Good.
is that it? Okay. Well, thanks so much, everyone, for coming. This was a blast.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you all.
Yeah,
Very
thanks.
great actually seeing you people, because I don't see anyone anymore. I'm locked in my house now forever.
There we go. Yeah.
So, this is like me going out on Saturday. Kids are locked in a different room.
Yeah.
I've got my glass of water. Very exciting.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, thanks so much, and we'll try to do more of these over the next couple of months. So hopefully you guys will be able to join in again. And yeah, thanks so much for joining.
Yes, thanks, Michelle.
Thanks very much. This was fun.
Yes.
Cheers, guys.
All right, cheers.
Cheers.
Bye. I'm going to slowly take you all out one at a time.
Okay.
Oh, I think
Right.
it's the broadcast.
It's
All right,
turning
we'll
crazy.
do a goodbye. Bye, everybody.